Welcome into the show. Lots to talk about today. We'll preview Alabama and Auburn's games. We'll talk Les Miles and a whole lot more coming up in the locker room. Inside the locker room with Gerhard Mathangani, I'm Chase Robinson. Lots to talk about. We'll dive into it. Let's start with the Auburn Tigers. Huge win. We talked about it last week. They're going to have to turn things around somehow. And boy, they started that Saturday night.
They really did. And I think you heard a lot of after the game what Gus Malzahn was saying was kind of the change in the arc in this team. And he talked about relieving the play call duties, handing them over to Rhett Lashley and Herb Hand. And then you have the best kicker in America really coming through big time with 6 field goals. One of the blemishes on Auburn's games, that game, or in the LSU game, was in the red zone. They couldn't put the ball in the end zone. They were able to get 6 field goals, but moving forward, that will be something they have to address, and Gus Malzahn has said as much. But the win that they got over LSU was that kind of win that Malzahn needed. I mean, there's been a long time since he won a SEC game at home, and to get a win over a team that is that caliber, that has that defense, and I know offensively they have their problems, but that has that defense, I think that Auburn really did a lot of good for themselves moving forward. We'll see how they take that momentum and go forward with it, but so far so good for Auburn, not so much for LSU.
With the play calling is this week's Louisiana Monroe game, is that going to help, the coaches get used to this play calling and Malzahn get used to, kind of stepping back just a little bit?
It started last week with Malzahn kind of taking a back seat last week, and it didn't really dawn on me he was doing it until he said it in his press conference. Then you come back and watch parts of that game, and you understand his demeanor on the sideline is a lot more laid back, it's a lot more relaxed, and I think that works better for him, both personally and professionally. And I think that it helps him be what a head coach is traditionally supposed to be, kind of the overseer of everything instead of going in the minute details of this offensive play, scripting second and long from the 45-yard line instead of just taking a step back and saying, hey, we need to build a position battle in the second half and things like that. So I think that he took a step towards it last week. This week will be even more of a step towards it. That way, when they go back into SEC play, he's a little bit more comfortable with those two guys calling the shots.
Well, here is Coach Gus Malzahn this week talking about his new role and play calling.
You do what's best for your team, and sometimes the reality hits you. And like I said, when you do something for 25 years, it's hard to change. But the time's right, and I'm looking forward to transitioning that way. During the game, it was very refreshing from the standpoint that I could be there for the special teams, the defense. I wasn't caught up in the next play. It'll help me during the week too, to be there more for our players, which is really the most important thing.
You can see Auburn and Louisiana Monroe Saturday at 2:30 on the SEC Network. Next, the Alabama Crimson Tide, big win over Kent State, but they move back into SEC play against Kentucky this Saturday.
Yeah, it's homecoming week, and it's really kind of two quote-unquote easier games. I mean, Alabama's a 34-point favorite. It's not like a game they saw against Ole Miss. Really, the story coming out of Ole Miss is could they stay healthy? The game coming out of Kent State is can they remain healthy? And, you saw a guy like Damian Harris get hurt. But I think we've answered some questions. Jalen Hurts, he had a modest game, 16 for 24, 164 yards. But with games like this, you never really get to measure how good you are. You could just really prevent bad stuff from happening. And I think they were able to do that. And Nick Saban said as much as they wanted to start fast and finish strong. I think they did that. And they'll have to carry it this week against Kentucky. Kentucky's an improved team, but I think that even Kentucky wants to take a little next step forward. And I think that they're not there yet. And they're looking across the street and seeing Louisville doing what they're doing. And I think that Kentucky's not in a great spot right now to even really contend with Alabama. It'll be if Alabama can do what they did last week, start fast, finish strong against the Wildcats.
I know we'll probably see all of the Alabama quarterbacks. When will we really see what this Alabama team has to offer?
It depends, because I think we'll only see it in SEC play. We'll only see it against teams that have pretty good defenses. So I don't even think we'll get a true test against Mississippi State. I think the next really true and good test will be against Texas A&M. And, we'll see kind of hodgepodge here and there But of course, the next game, in my opinion, where we will be able to kind of get a real true benchmark of this team is that third Saturday in October against Tennessee.
Well, here's Coach Nick Saban this week as they prepare for Kentucky.
Kentucky has played their best in the last 2 games that they've played. You know, Mark Stoops has done a really good job of sort of finding out who they are and how they want to play, and they played really well in the last 2 games. Really good skilled players on offense, really good running backs, wide receivers. You know the stats, they're explosive guys. They have pretty impressive performances to this point.
Alabama takes on Kentucky 6 p.m. Saturday on ESPN. The Jacksonville State Gamecocks, huge win over Liberty. They've had a tough road so far. Off week this week. Well, much needed. Conference play begins the next.
Yeah, I don't think their schedule could have laid out any more perfectly. They started with a D2 team in North Alabama, got a solid win there, not a great win, not a great performance, but about what you would expect out of an opener. And then they go and play LSU, one of the teams at that point of the season was one of the teams talked about being one of the teams that can play for a national championship and contend for an SEC championship and all of that. And then they get a good win over Coastal Carolina, but they're not happy with the way they played. Another non-region game against a playoff-like team against Coastal Carolina. Then they play another game just like Coastal on the road this time against a team like Liberty and put together what I think is their best win of the season so far. Won that game 48-19. And then they get a bye week before conference play. Everything lays out perfectly because they're playing their best right now, get some guys healthy, and then play that very tough OVC schedule. And then we'll see what this team is like as they try to win games that they're on paper supposed to win. All the other games were kind of toss-ups. I mean, Liberty up until about week 2 or week 3 was a toss-up. Coastal Carolina was a toss-up. LSU was a toss-up. And then North Alabama was the opener. And then now that we're getting into games where they're expected to win, we'll see how they handle it.
Playing like they have been the past 4 games, could they make that run to the championship like they did last season?
I think last week's game was a really, really clean, strong starting point to that. They now see where they are when they play average, when they make some mistakes like they did against LSU and like they did against North Alabama, and then we see what they are when they put it all together. And Eli Jenkins, 224 yards, 121 rushing yards, 224 through the air, 4 touchdowns. You know, the only quarterback, FBS or FCS, with more production than Eli Jenkins is a guy named Lamar Jackson. That's the Heisman favorite right now, playing for the Louisville Cardinals. I don't think that he could play much better. This team can get better. We'll see how they do in the OVC play.
Well, again, JSU has the week off this week, but they'll be back in OVC action in the next week. We're going to grab a timeout. When we come back, we'll talk some high school sports. So stay with us inside the locker room. Back here in the locker room, we're going to take some time now to talk some high school sports. And we'll start with high school football. Friday night, the Pigskin Roundup. Our game of the week is Oxford as they head over to Etowah County to take on the Southside Panthers. Oxford sitting at 6-0 on the season. Southside at 4-1. Oxford sitting at number 4 in the polls, and they're playing a good Southside team. Alaric Williams expected to be back for the Southside Panthers, so we're really looking forward to that matchup coming up Friday night as Oxford takes on Southside. Chad Barnett will be there. And here's what's coming up this week on the Pigskin Roundup. Of course, that's our game of the week. We'll also have cameras all over the place, including Ohatchee, Cherokee County, Piedmont, Etowah, Lincoln, Gadsden City, and more. All the scores, all the highlights. Jacksonville head coach Clint Smith, as well as Cleburne County head coach Michael Short will be live in studio. And remember, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Let's take a look now at the high school football polls for the Alabama Sports Writers Association. A lot of our local teams ranked, and we'll start with 6A. There you see Spanish Fort leading, followed by Hillcrest of Tuscaloosa, Blount County in 3, and there you see the Oxford Yellow Jackets sitting at number 4 in Class 6A, ahead of that huge matchup like we talked about earlier against Southside. Opelika is at number 5, Minor at number 6, Park Crossing at 7, Hartselle High School at 8, Clay Chalkville, the defending 6A state champs, at number 9, and Chelsea at number 10. Next up in Class 5A, Jackson High School leads at number 1, St. Paul at 2, Beauregard 3, Etowah at number 4. We've seen huge wins from them. One of their area teams, Scottsboro, sits at number 5. That's who the Alexandria Valley Cubs have. this week. So 2 area teams right there at 4 and 5. Then Russellville at 6, Carroll High School at 7, Demopolis at 8, Mortimer Jordan at 9, and Central Clay County there, the Vols in at number 10 ahead of their huge game this week. Next up is in 4A. There's UMS Wright Prep. They have been in 5A the last couple of years, but they moved down to 4A. Madison Academy, who's been in 3A, they're making some noise in 4A as they are in the 2 spot. Haleyville at 3, Andalusia at 4, Cordova at 5, and there you see the Montford Lions at number 6, Rogers 7, Leeds at number 8, who lost to Piedmont last week. That was our game of the week from last week. Lost 22-7 to Piedmont. There you see Jacksonville, number 9. They're breaking into the top 10 there, and they're sitting at 5-0 on the season. And Thomasville comes in at number 10. In Class 3A, there you see Piedmont sitting at that number 1 spot like they have been for so long. They got there towards the end of last season, won the state championship, started off at number 1 in 3A, and as they're 5-0 on the season, they sit there at number 1, followed by Gordo, Montevallo, Mobile Christian, Opp, Colbert County, and there you see another team from Calhoun County, the Ohatchee Indians at number 7. This is the highest ranking that they've had in a long, long time. They haven't had a winning season since 2007 or so, so it's been a while for them. So great job to the Ohatchee Indians so far this season. They're 6-0. Have a huge region matchup against Wellborn Friday night. Looking forward to that one. You'll see highlights from that game on the Pigskin Roundup as well. Oakman at number 8, T.R. Miller at 9, and Delville at 10. Next up in Class 1A, Maplesville at 1, Linden at 2. There you see Spring Garden at number 3, another one of our local teams in the number 3 spot, followed by Addison, Sweetwater, Decatur Heritage, Wadley, Georgiana, and there's Cedar Bluff at number 9, and there's a tie for 10th place as Hubertville and Pickens County. So that rounds out the Alabama Sports Writers Association high school football polls for all of our local teams. So many good local high school football teams here in this area. Like we mentioned, you can see all that coming up on the Pigskin Roundup. This weekend is the Calhoun County Volleyball Tournament, and it takes place at Jacksonville High School coming up on Saturday. So let's take a look at the matchups for that first round of the Calhoun County Volleyball Tournament. The number 8 seed Sachs takes on number 9 Weaver at 9 a.m. Also at 9 a.m. will be number 5 Donahoe taking on number 12 Piedmont. And number 4 Alexandria takes on number 13 Ohatchee. At 10:30 you can see the number 3 seed take on the number 14 seed in Jacksonville and Jacksonville Christian. Faith Christian, the number 6 team, will play Wellborn also at 10:30, as well as White Plains and Sacred Heart. And at noon you can see Oxford take on Anniston. And also at noon you can see the number 1 team, Pleasant Valley, take on the winner of that Sachs-Weaver matchup. The championship will be held at Pete Matthews Coliseum at Jacksonville State University, 6 p.m. on Monday, October 3rd. And with these volleyball teams, so many great teams, just like football. A lot of teams ranked in the state as well for the volleyball. Pleasant Valley, the number 1 seed in the Calhoun County Volleyball Tournament, only losing 2 games so far this season. 1 to Decatur Heritage. They lost to Jacksonville earlier this week, so that already sets up a phenomenal Calhoun County volleyball tournament with the top seed Pleasant Valley, followed by Oxford. Jacksonville, always a good volleyball team. Donahoe made it to the state championship last season, so a lot of good volleyball. Check that out at Jacksonville High School this Saturday, and then the championship, always a good volleyball championship. That's at Pete Matthews Coliseum Monday at 6 p.m. We're going to talk more college football coming up, so stay with us. Gerhard will be back inside the locker room. Back here in the locker room, it's time to talk some more college football and a topic that has been talked about all week long since Sunday, the firing of LSU head coach Les Miles. He's been there for a while. Won a national championship, 2 SEC titles, a few bad games, and he's gone. Yeah,
you figured that LSU's brass was kind of posturing for this, and you saw this. You saw the crumbs of this, the breadcrumbs of this last year, and then at the very end, the 11th hour, he got saved, and they wanted him, and they kept him, and they said all the right things at the time. But this offense has been so bad. This is my opinion. This offense has been so bad. This moment when LSU fires Les Miles during the season was going to happen either way. Whether it was Auburn, whether it was Alabama, whether it was Texas A&M later in the year, Arkansas, it didn't matter who it was. Once they lost that second game and they went from contender to completely out of the playoffs, that's when they knew that I knew they were going to fire Les Miles. I didn't know it was going to be as abrupt, and I didn't know it was going to be after such a heartbreaking loss to Auburn. And you think about his legacy, you think about the kind of guy he is. There's no character like him, really in SEC, and I think that'll really hit next year during media days when we don't have that Les Miles personality and those epic 30-second sound bites from him. But he's such a great recruiter. He sent so many players to the NFL. He's a good coach and I think a good guy. He got caught in a situation where at LSU, the standard has always been keep up with Alabama. And ever since Nick Saban left and he came back to Alabama, it's been keep up with Alabama. And then everybody now looks back at what he did when he won the national championship. Well, he did it with Saban's guys. And he was never really able to climb out of that shadow, just like a lot of other coaches in the SEC who've been quote unquote run off by the Saban effect deal. I don't like it in the short term. I do understand it in the long term.
Ed Orgeron has taken over as the interim head coach. He's already changing some stuff around. Is he going to be able to for this season, turn things around and get it going in a better direction?
He's definitely a player's coach. And from all the reports down there, the players love his energy. And the reason why he's such a good recruiter is he can relate to players. And the reason why so many people keep him on his staff is because he's a good recruiter, because he can relate to players. And I feel like Ed Orgeron is one of those guys who's an interim coach every other year. We see him, I felt like we've seen him at Ole Miss, at USC. I want to put him like at Arkansas, Baylor. I mean, all these. He's a perfect guy for this position, to be the stopgap guy that can get some energy and excitement around the program, because they do need it right now. Their offense right now is just putrid. They're so reliant on Leonard Fournette to get you going. You just stack 8 in the box and you bottle him up like Alabama or like Wisconsin did and like Auburn did, and they're one-dimensional. If they can spread that thing out a little bit and maybe even get Brandon Harris back in the fold and run a little 2-quarterback system with him and Etling, I'm surprised to see what this team could do, because LSU has talent all over the field. A lot of guys you'll see in the April NFL draft are going to be guys from LSU's teams right now. They had the talent to do so. If Ed Orgeron can get a little bit of momentum going, I think they can have a strong season.
A lot of big names in the toss for this LSU job. Jimbo Fisher, Tom Herman, everybody else. Who's going to be next at LSU?
Just for fun, I went and looked up. I didn't even know they had this until I was looking it up. They have a Vegas lines. You could actually bet money on who is going to be the next coach at LSU. Let me just rattle off some of these numbers. Todd Herman is the favorite going into it. He's 5-4. Jimbo Fisher is the next favorite. He's 3-1. And really, it makes sense because Jimbo Fisher was the guy they were kind of politicking for last year when they were trying to fire Les Miles. And so we'll see if Jimbo Fisher's kind of gotten fed up with some of the things that's gone on down at Florida State, or if he wants to stay down at Florida State and continue a legacy down there. The next guys on the list, I'll rattle these off pretty quick. Larry Fedora, 4-1, I mean. Willie Taggart of South Florida, 6-1. Ed Orgeron, 9-1. Lane Kiffin is 12-1. Chip Kelly, 15-1. Bobby Petrino, 18-1. Art Briles, 28-1. One of the things that really sticks out to me is that Lane Kiffin is on this list at 12, ahead of Chip Kelly, who would have a very, very good reason to go back to college football with that dumpster fire that is the San Francisco 49ers. And Art Briles being so low on that list at 28-1, bottom line is I think LSU is going to want a guy that runs an offensive, maybe an offensive, not necessarily dominating, but definitely an offensive power scheme that gets away from this fold of this one running back system. I think they want some excitement down there, and some of the guys on that list can provide it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, and we'll keep you up with that. Let's shift gears to baseball. Sunday, another thing happening Sunday that just puts you really at a loss for words was the loss of 24-year-old Jose Fernandez, pitcher for the Miami Marlins. Was scheduled to start Sunday, was killed in a boating accident on Sunday morning. And a great tribute to him in their game Monday, but you just saw the emotion from the Miami Marlins that day. Yeah,
and really the emotions kind of spread throughout sports, because he's a guy that if you don't keep up with baseball, you don't really understand how infectious this guy was. I mean, he defected from Cuba, traveled those 90 miles from Cuba to South Florida, and then was the starting pitcher, the star of the hometown team of the Miami Marlins, and he had everything that could put him up there with some of the greats. And then, you know, what we saw the other night was it was just unbelievable. It was spine-chilling with D. Gordon, his best friend on the team, hitting the furthest home run he has ever hit in his entire life. He said he's never hit that in batting practice. And then you saw all the emotions that came after that. And you just saw how much not only this team loved this guy, but the city loved this guy and the city loved his story because he was the guy that made it. And he was the guy that was at the crux, at the very beginning of what could have been a phenomenal career. And he's one of the guys that made it from that area where they wanted freedom down there in Cuba. And the guy that is the pillar, that is the pillar of that freedom. He was kind of the symbol for so many people.
Right.
And to see him pass, you know, at such an early age, and then obviously it kills the Marlins from a baseball perspective, which is like dead last down on the list of things that is heartbreaking about the story. But just a phenomenal tribute to him, and I'm really glad about what the Marlins did Monday night.
Definitely a special moment on Monday for the Marlins with that. Let's shift gears back to college football now for our Pick Six. And let's take a look at the standings from last week. I went 5-1. Gerhard and Mickey both 4-2. Mickey holds the lead there, 16-8. Our first game up today is Louisville at Clemson. Mickey's not here, but we got his picks, and Mickey went with the number 5 team, the Clemson Tigers.
Same here, and the reason why is because I wonder if Louisville's kind of run out of steam, so to speak, and if they prove me wrong in this game, I will never pick against Louisville ever again. And Lamar Jackson, I think, will have a huge game. But this game at night in Death Valley, I think it's a little too tough.
See, Clemson has not quite impressed me yet so far this season.
That's fair.
I'm going with the number 3 Louisville Cardinals. Next up is Tennessee at Georgia, and the Mickey Shaddricks went with the Tennessee Vols.
Yeah, I'll do the same thing. And Georgia's really been shaky for a long time, and kind of those chickens came to roost, so to speak, for Georgia last week, and when they got throttled by Ole Miss. There's only so many times you could beat Nicholls State by 1 point and come back from behind to beat Missouri by a point and then not get exposed. They're young. They'll be there. They're not there yet. Tennessee is rolling. I like the Vols.
I got the Vols in this one as well. Next up is Wisconsin at Michigan, and Mickey Shaddricks went with the Michigan Wolverines in this one.
Wisconsin beat a Michigan State team that got a big win the week before. And now Wisconsin is that team coming off the big hangover win. I think that they fall the exact same way they beat Michigan State. They fall to Michigan because of the fact they're coming off a huge game. That game being in the big house, I like the Wolverines.
And I am going with Michigan in this one as well. Next up, Stanford at Washington. And Mickey in this one went with the visiting Stanford.
Out of the 6 games we had to pick, this was the toughest game for me to pick. I think this is a Friday night game, which I kind of hate that it's a Friday night game, but I like Washington. I like what they've done. This game is at Washington. I think Stanford's more talented. I think Washington pulls it off at the very end of the game. A close game and a great game Friday night.
I'm going with Stanford in this one. Next is Texas at Oklahoma State. And Mickey went with the home team, Oklahoma State.
The guy who builds his graphics name is Jason Sparks, and I told him I will pick Texas this one time because Texas, they hurt me the first time against Notre Dame when I picked the Irish, and Texas won a thriller. I said I'm picking Texas for this game, but if they lose in Stillwater, I am never picking Texas ever again.
I'm going with Texas in a close one as well. And last up is North Carolina at Florida State, and Mickey went with the Noles.
Yeah, this is a game that I think North Carolina last year was the story, the darling kind of the ACC. Florida State, you had to worry about how they would bounce back after that Louisville game. Bounce back big time last week and get South Florida. I like the Noles as well, and this one could get ugly.
I'm going with Florida State in this one as well. And that'll do it for our Pick 6. That'll do it for the show. Thanks so much for joining us this week in the locker room. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week.